That night, while I listened to the stranger snoring in the living room and the smell of alcohol wafted up to my nose, I lay awake thinking, force them out? Impossible. Go to court? Too long. In just a few months they could have destroyed the apartment, the furniture, maybe even our entire financial life. So I reread the loan contract line by line, word by word, until I found what I was looking for. A very clear clause. The borrower is not allowed to register third parties in the mortgage property without the written consent of the lender. In case of violation, the bank can demand immediate full repayment of the loan. And then I realized that what my husband had done in secret could become exactly what would get them thrown out. Then I thought of something else, of social assistance, of benefits, of Lena's situation. Officially, she was a mother in difficulty. Unofficially, she drank, spent money, had men over at the apartment and left the children to fend for themselves. And at that moment, I stopped being a victim. I started to build a strategy. The next morning, as soon as the offices opened, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the bank. I explained who I was, that I was a co-borrower, that minors and a third party had been registered in the mortgaged property without my consent, that I feared for the safety of the property, that the apartment was deteriorating, and that the situation could pose a serious risk. The advisor's tone changed instantly. She was no longer polite, she was cold, strict, professional. For a bank, having children registered in a mortgaged property without authorization is an absolute nightmare. She told me that a verification procedure would be initiated. The second call I made was to Child Protection Services and Social Services. I described what I saw, the squalor, the alcohol, the children sleeping on dirty mattresses, the lack of structure, the men coming and going, the mother's behavior, the questionable use of welfare benefits. I didn't make anything up. I simply described exactly what they had turned into their daily life. 3 days later, the first shock inspection arrived. My husband received an official letter from the bank. When he came home, he was as white as a sheet. He held the letter with trembling hands. The bank demanded that the situation be rectified within 7 days, failing which it reserved the right to demand immediate repayment of the entire loan. A gigantic sum, the kind of money that ruins your life, the kind of money that makes everything fall apart all at once. My husband kept muttering that we didn't have that money, that we were going to lose the apartment, that we would end up ruined. And Lena, despite all that, kept boasting. She said it was just a bluff, that no one would throw a mother and her children out on the street. I looked at her calmly and explained something very simple to her. The bank didn't care about her talk, her status, or her theatrics. As long as the loan wasn't repaid, this apartment was above all a financial guarantee. And if the bank considered that this guarantee was threatened, it would crush everyone without a second thought. There, for the first time, I saw a bit of fear in her eyes, but I knew she would try to hold out until the end. So I waited for the second wave. I didn't clean the apartment the night before. I left out what they had created. The dirty dishes, the smells, the empty bottles, the clothes thrown in the entryway, the traces of their carelessness. In the morning, the children were sitting in the hallway eating dry pasta straight from the package. Lena was still sleeping. At exactly 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there were several of them. An inspector, 2 social workers, a representative from family assistance. They came in, looked around, and the silence that followed their first inspection said more than any words could. They smelled the odor, they saw the mess, they saw the children, they saw the lack of food, they saw Lena sleeping as if nothing was wrong. They woke her up, and within a few minutes, all her composure collapsed. She tried to blame me, to say that I was the one hiding the food, that I was persecuting her, that I was making everything up. But the social services weren't there to watch a performance. They were looking at the facts. Why wasn't the older child in school? Why was the youngest wearing dirty clothes? Why was the refrigerator almost empty when benefits were being paid? Why were there bottles of alcohol and obvious signs that men had been there? Why were the children sleeping in such conditions? In just a few sentences, the tone changed. There was no longer any talk of excuses. Now it was about reports, monitoring, possible suspension of benefits, urgent assessments. And even if nothing changed, possibly removing the children. And here, something terrible yet revealing. What really made Lena panic was not the threat of temporarily losing her children, but the threat of losing the money. From that moment on, she started begging, first by shouting, then by crying, then by promising she would leave right away. That very evening, the apartment looked like an evacuation scene. She was throwing her things into bags, screaming insults, cursing me, calling my husband a traitor, blaming the whole world. I was standing in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in hand, watching her struggle in the chaos she had created herself. I simply told her that in the morning, a commission from the bank could arrive, and if they found even the slightest trace of this illegal setup, things would get even worse. At that point, she sped up. She no longer knew where to go. She no longer knew what to do, but she had finally understood that she was not the queen of the place. She was an abusive guest to whom reality was presenting the bill. As for my husband, he was sitting there, crushed, unable to help his sister, unable to look at me, unable even to defend what he had done. He had wanted to be the nice brother, the easy savior, the one who says yes to everyone and lets others pay the price. And in the end, he was nothing more than an empty man, sitting among the bags, the noise, and the humiliation. When the door finally closed behind his sister and her children, the apartment became silent, a silence that was almost unreal. The smell of fried fish, stale tobacco, alcohol, and invasion lingered. I filled a bucket with water, poured in cleaning product without counting, put on gloves, then told my husband to get up. He looked at me exhausted. I told him we had to take out the sofa. Why? He asked. Because it smelled of bedbugs, sweat, and that man she had brought home. He didn't argue. He obeyed. A week later, the apartment was spotless. I had scrubbed everything, washed everything, disinfected everything, including the curtains. The recordings had been cancelled. The bank had been reassured. Social services had learned that the struggling family had returned to their official place of residence. The storm had subsided, but something, however, would never return to normal. One evening while we were in the kitchen, my husband finally broke the silence. He told me that I was someone frightening. I almost smiled. He reproached me for knowing exactly where to strike, for having used the bank, the services, the law. He asked me if I had wanted his children to be taken away from him. I looked him straight in the eye and answered no. I hadn't wanted to destroy his sister. I had wanted to save my house, my home, my space. This place that had delivered him up as prey to parasites under the pretense of family kindness. I told him that you can't be good to everyone when those you protect are destroying the ones you love. That at some point you have to choose, defend your family or feed those who live at its expense. He had chosen the parasites, and that choice I will never forget. What happened at my house that day taught me something essential. Some people respect neither words nor boundaries nor kindness. They keep pushing as long as you back down, they keep taking as long as you give in, they keep breaking as long as you forgive. And then one day, they come across someone who stops being afraid. Someone who understands that silence protects abusers, never the victims. Maybe people will say I was cold, calculating, ruthless. Maybe. But there are times when gentleness no longer saves anything. You have to act. You have to protect what is yours. You have to close the door, call the right people, use the rules, the contracts, the evidence, the truth. Because a home is not a refuge for opportunists. Because loving doesn't mean letting yourself be crushed. And because a single call at the right moment can sometimes put out those who thought they had settled in for good.